Tim. There's an outfit out of East Lansing, Michigan, a consultant, Anderson Economic Group, and they have estimated the price increases could be as much as $12,000 on an electric vehicle.
In a move that sent shockwaves through the North American automotive industry, President Donald Trump's administration imposed sweeping 25% tariffs on vehicles and auto parts imported from Mexico. This decision disrupted decades of integrated supply chains, leading to immediate and severe consequences. Major automakers, including Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, faced production halts, with Stellantis announcing temporary closures of factories in Canada and Mexico and laying off 900 American employees as a direct response to the tariffs. The tariffs not only strained U.S.-Mexico trade relations but also threatened the stability of the entire North American auto sector, which relies heavily on cross-border manufacturing and part sourcing. Industry experts warned that the increased costs could add between $2,000 and $12,000 to the price of a new vehicle, burdening consumers and potentially leading to a significant downturn in auto sales. As the situation unfolds, questions arise about the long-term implications of such protectionist policies on domestic employment, consumer prices, and international trade partnerships. Will these tariffs truly bolster American manufacturing, or will they inflict lasting damage on an industry that has been a cornerstone of the U.S. economy? Number 5. Mexico chokes U.S. auto supply lines. The retaliation was ruthless. Just days after Trump's tariffs on Mexican autos and parts were enacted, Mexico responded not with words, but with a scalpel. Critical auto components, gear assemblies, sensors, and advanced electronics stopped moving across the border. Overnight, production lines in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee froze. Trucks were turned away. Warehouses ran dry. Entire shifts were canceled. Executives at General Motors and Ford scrambled. These were not parts that could be replaced quickly or domestically. They were high-efficiency components produced with precision in specialized factories in northern Mexico. Retooling American plants to produce them would take years and billions of dollars, money no one was prepared to spend in the middle of a trade standoff. Mexico's move was not just retaliation. It was surgical economic warfare. By targeting just-in-time components, they did not have to shut down every sector, just the arteries feeding America's industrial heart. And it worked. Trump's administration, expecting Mexico to back down, instead watched as entire United States factories went dark. Layoffs started within a week. Stellantis alone announced closures that impacted both Mexico and Canada, and laid off 900 United States workers. Analysts warned it was only the beginning. Inside the White House, pressure mounted. Trump had promised to bring manufacturing back, but his actions were dismantling it in real time. Chief executives began speaking out behind closed doors, warning of billions in lost output. The American auto industry, long a symbol of industrial might, suddenly looked fragile. And the question that hung over Wall Street was chilling. If Mexico could do this in 1 week, what would happen if China joined in? Would the United States auto industry survive another blow like this? Number 4. Detroit factories go silent. The layoffs begin. The first wave hit hard. Within 2 weeks of Mexico's counterstrike, auto plants across the Rust Belt began shutting down. In Detroit, Toledo, and Flint, factories that had run for generations fell eerily quiet. Thousands of workers were told to go home indefinitely. The parts they needed to finish assembling vehicles were stuck at Mexican ports or restricted altogether. Ford furloughed hundreds. General Motors cut production shifts. Even Toyota, with massive operations in Texas, felt the sting. Stellantis halted work on key lines and warned that further closures were imminent. Union leaders, already weakened from years of automation and outsourcing, were blindsided. The supply chain, built over decades to run lean and fast, had collapsed in less than a month. The Trump administration downplayed the fallout, claiming it was a short-term adjustment. But inside the industry, executives were not buying it. They had spent billions optimizing for integration with Mexico. Ripping that apart meant lost contracts, delayed models, and shrinking margins. For many suppliers, especially small ones in Indiana and Ohio, the contracts did not just shrink. They vanished. Worse still, local economies began to crumble. When a plant shuts down, it is not just the workers on the line who suffer. It is the diners, daycare centers, gas stations, and landlords. In cities like Flint, where the auto industry is the backbone of everything, the economic shock felt like a second recession. Trump promised to punish Mexico. But the punishment was bleeding out in American cities instead. So here is the question no one in Washington wanted to ask. Were these tariffs really about protecting American workers? Or were they just political theater at the cost of real jobs? Number 3. CEO turn on Trump. This is industrial suicide. Behind closed doors, corporate America began to revolt. Executives who had once praised Trump for tax cuts and deregulation were now sounding the alarm. Auto chief executives, parts manufacturers, and even logistics giants started calling the tariffs what they really were, a direct threat to United States industrial survival. Mary Barra at General Motors reportedly warned the administration that the current strategy was unsustainable. Ford's leadership submitted internal memos projecting billions in lost revenue if the standoff with Mexico dragged on. Even foreign automakers like Honda and BMW, operating large United States factories, said delays in Mexican components would force them to slash output or move production abroad entirely. The turning point came during a private industry roundtable in Washington. One unnamed executive, according to a leak published by the Financial Times, described the tariffs as industrial suicide. He said the White House had underestimated how fragile the supply chains had become and how little backup existed. The Trump team pushed back, accusing chief executives of being weak and disloyal to American workers. But the numbers told a different story. By the third week of retaliation, more than 20,000 jobs were either furloughed or cut, according to industry estimates. Share prices for the big three tumbled. Inventory at dealerships was running low. Consumers were already seeing price hikes. Meanwhile, Trump doubled down at a press conference, claiming the tariffs were working perfectly. But Wall Street was not buying it. The Dow dropped 700 points in a single day after Ford revised its earnings outlook. The backlash had begun, and it was not coming from the media. It was coming from boardrooms. The real question now was this. If America's own chief executives were calling this a disaster, who exactly was Trump fighting for? Number 2. Mexico aligns with China, the geopolitical shockwave. As Trump escalated his tariff war, Mexico did not just fight back economically, it went global. In a stunning diplomatic twist, Mexico began strengthening trade ties with China, the European Union, and even Japan. What was once a regional supply chain battle suddenly became a full-blown geopolitical realignment. While Washington fumbled with retaliatory measures, Mexico's trade officials were flying to Beijing. High-level meetings were held to fast-track joint industrial investments, with Chinese automakers and battery suppliers offered tax breaks to relocate operations into Mexico's industrial heartlands. The message was clear: if the United States no longer wanted to trade, Mexico would find new partners and fast. By week 4, reports emerged that several electric vehicle battery facilities originally planned for the United States had been diverted to Chinese-backed ventures in Mexico. These were not small startups. They were billion-dollar projects meant to supply the next generation of electric vehicles. For Trump, this was a direct betrayal. But for Mexico, it was strategic survival. Officials framed the move as a response to an unreliable United States trade environment. And Chinese media celebrated the new alliance as a symbol of American decline. Security experts inside the Pentagon were rattled. If Mexico became a staging ground for Chinese industrial influence just across the border, the implications were not just economic, they were national security. The American auto industry was not just losing parts. It was losing its geopolitical leverage. And that leads to a question few in Congress were ready to face. Did Trump just push Mexico into China's arms and hand America's auto future to its biggest rival? Number 1. The entire auto industry faces collapse, a crisis of confidence. This was not just a disruption. It was a full-scale collapse of the system that kept America's auto industry alive. By the 6th week of Trump's tariffs and Mexico's counterstrike, the ripple effects had become a tidal wave. According to industry projections, over 40,000 jobs were gone. Billions of dollars in vehicle inventory sat unfinished. Hundreds of suppliers declared bankruptcy. And for the first time since the 2008 crash, the American auto sector faced a true existential crisis. What made this different was not just the scale. It was the exposure. The world saw, in real time, how fragile the entire industrial model had become. One tariff, one strategic retaliation, and the whole system crumbled. Car prices soared. Analysts estimated that the average cost of a new vehicle spiked by more than $5,000. Used cars became more expensive than ever. Maintenance shops could not get basic parts. Rental fleets stopped renewing inventory. Ride-share prices surged. And consumers, already facing inflation, had nowhere to run. This was not just economic pain. It was a collapse in trust. Investors lost faith. Boardrooms turned defensive. Trade allies questioned America's reliability. Mexico's counterstrike, executed with precision, exposed a hard truth. America had built an industrial empire on global interdependence, and Trump had shattered it in weeks. The very strategy Trump claimed would protect America had detonated its most iconic industry from the inside. So now the only question left is this: was this collapse a mistake? Or was it the warning shot for a much bigger breakdown coming next? Final thought. What began as a trade dispute has spiraled into one of the most devastating industrial crises in modern United States history. Trump's tariffs triggered a counterstrike that crippled supply chains, collapsed production, and forced the auto industry to its knees. The very factories he vowed to protect are now silent. Thousands of workers have lost their jobs. Entire towns are unraveling. Mexico, once treated as a subordinate trade partner, has emerged as a strategic force, aligning with China, controlling leverage, and reshaping the future of manufacturing in North America. And the most brutal irony, Trump's promise to restore American strength has instead revealed how vulnerable the system really is. So the question now is no longer whether this was a mistake. The question is, will the next industry fall even harder? Comment the company you think will collapse next, and do not forget to subscribe so you do not miss the next blow in this unfolding economic war.